It's a mock draft Monday edition of Love of the Star, proudly presented by the On Time Experts and the official AC heating and plumbing partner for the Dallas Cowboys. We got a cold front coming into the Metroplex, and I'm sure it might be chilly wherever you are consuming and listening to Love of the Star. So make sure that heater is working for you and your family. You're going to pay. You don't pay. Same day guarantee policy for certain repairs. They're offering service plans to keep your system running efficiently year round. No better place to go than the On Time Experts. Call them right now. The On Time Experts. Visit them at theontimeexperts.com. You're just going to click that book now button. You're going to pay less over time because they're correctly diagnosing your issues and fixing it right the first time. Before we dive into your questions in the mailbag and some mock draft stuff, let's just do some house cleaning here. Zach Wolchuk alongside the Super Bowl winning scout Brian Broaddus, and we do have in-person interviews going on for the Cowboys defensive coordinator job. They did go ahead and have Durante Jones in the building over the weekend, so they got their second visit with him, this one in person, and then I do believe Jonathan Gannon should be coming in and rolling through Frisco today, so they'll get an in-person done with him as well. A lot of people asking Brian, like, hey, you think they're going to wait around for Jim Leonard, who is, of course, the secondary coach, defensive backs coach with Denver? You need him to lose. You need the Broncos to lose to be able to actually bring him back in for round two of the interviews. But anything that you're hearing, and do you think that the Jim Leonard situation has anything to do with, hey, will they be patient? Will they wait? Will they not?
Yeah, I think they actually will be patient here, and if you really, really do want Jim Leonard, and listen, there's a lot of dialogue going back and forth about the situation with the Giants. And, if in fact, we'll know, I think pretty quickly here, if Jim Leonard is a legitimate candidate. And I say it in this way, a legitimate candidate in that, has somebody in Jim Leonard's camp already told the Cowboys that he is going to, at the end of the season, go to the Giants? I mean, he is going to, is that his plan? Is his intent, or is somebody saying, no, you need to wait. He'd like to talk to you guys about the opportunity. I think the Cowboys will have an idea about Jim Leonard here this week. Whether his intent is to, yes, I want to go work with John Harbaugh with the Giants when this is all over. I'm not going to take any more interviews. That's it. The fact that he did interview through the Zoom the first time tells me he's interested in the job. So if in fact, but that was before all the things had been kind of rolling about Harbaugh getting the job with the Giants. So, really kind of a lot to unpack there, but I have a feeling that they'll know his intent this week, whether they need to go forward or to go ahead and interview these other candidates like they're still a possibility for them to get this job.
Yeah, and the other one that they also do want to do another in-person interview with is Christian Parker, who is the secondary coach in Green Bay. All three of these guys.
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. Yes, sorry. Robert Covington's in Green Bay.
Right.
All of these three, to me, have a very intriguing resume, up-and-coming coaches. You talk about, the coaching aspect of it, some of the things that Brian Schottenheimer described in the presser, things that he's looking for. It sounds like the track record for all three of these guys, very, very exciting. If you're a Cowboy fan, maybe not household names, but definitely coaches that I'm excited that they're talking with. I think, the Jonathan Gannons of the world, the Jeff Ulbrichts, which are names that we had heard. Ulbrich, it sounds like he's going to stay in Atlanta.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the Cowboys were really interested in talking to Jeff Ulbrich. I really do. I feel like that, to me, that might have been the number one guy. And I think this is a correlation between Brian Schottenheimer and Dan Quinn. And I think that's kind of where things were looking that way. I think that Schottenheimer was leaning on Dan Quinn on some of these names, and to see that Jeff Ulbrich, and listen, Arthur Blank made it really clear, when they moved on from Raheem Morris, was that they wanted Jeff Ulbrich to stay. They were interested in him staying. So, that's, they got their wish. And I would venture to say that, with Kevin Stefanski getting that job, with Matt Ryan's really first hire as president of football there with the Falcons, there was some discussion like, listen, if we give you this job, we would like for you to hire Jeff Ulbrich. And I think that's where this one went. And Cowboys never got that shot. Atlanta didn't give him that shot. He was going to be some coaches would take that job. Some guys would say, listen, I'm not interested in doing that. And the Falcons would have probably said, well, then I'm sorry, we can't hire you as a coach. And so, that's the dangers you walk. And, and it was clear that Kevin Stefanski, now in a bounce back situation, much like what we've seen where, some of these coaches don't take time to get away from it. But obviously he struck when the iron was still hot. He was doing interviews with teams, and the Falcons said, well, determine that he's the guy. So all that being said, I think the Cowboys lost out on a guy they really wanted, but we'll see how the Jim Leonard situation plays, and then the other coaches that are doing the actual interviews themselves.
And then the Jim Schwartz stuff, the Cowboys, of course, have not interviewed him. Now, it sounds like I had wondered, would he just follow Kevin Stefanski? But he's gotten a second interview already with the Browns. He might actually be a serious contender to just get the head coaching job in Cleveland, which obviously would take him out of the defensive coordinator market. Same thing with Brian Flores. And Brian Flores was the sexy name. The good thing is you have Durante Jones, who is off of the Brian Flores tree, also has relationships with several other great coaches that have defensive coordinator backgrounds. You've got Christian Parker, who's off the Vic Fangio coaching tree as well. So you're getting a lot of ideas of defenses that have caused the Cowboys problems and Dak Prescott problems in the past. But do you think that Schwartz and Flores are still in consideration here? Or is that just they're probably getting head coaching jobs? No.
Well, I think the head coaching stuff is clearly something I know somebody asked me this morning. I think it was a mailbag question that I went ahead and answered. I didn't know if you would get to it at the end, but someone asked me why no Flores, why no Jim Schwartz. And first off, I think that you're right about the head coaching things. I think both guys are up for head coaching opportunities. Now, what's interesting is Brian Flores did interview for the defensive coordinator job with the Commanders. Mm-hmm. So that makes me feel like, well, wait a minute, at least he's entertaining the opportunity. This is just my gut feeling, and it's nothing other than a gut feeling. I don't think Jerry Jones wants to pay Brian Flores what he's worth. And I think it would be very similar to what maybe you're paying Brian Schottenheimer to get him to be the defensive coordinator. I don't feel like that, and people out there are probably, they're losing their damn mind right now when you start to talk about, wait a minute, there's no cap for coaches. Don't you want the best coaches and all that? There might be a possibility where they think that Brian Flores is a little too rough around the edges for them too. There might be some stuff going on too with this actual suit going on. Jerry Jones, very pro league, very pro NFL, very pro the Shield, and I think you're in a situation right now where there's a couple of factors that are probably working against Brian Flores, Jerry Jones feeling for him and the lawsuit. And then also, though, the price you're gonna have to pay to probably entertain Brian Flores' services as your defensive coordinator.
So, as you've gotten to kind of do some homework on these candidates, do you have anybody that, hey, just your personal opinion, not who you think they're going to hire, but that you might lean one way or another that you'd like to see get the job?
I've talked to a lot of guys around the league that know these coaches, and the one thing that I've kind of got, and this is just not my opinion, but just again, soliciting these guys and, or soliciting people who have worked with these coaches and stuff. The one that sounds the absolute most interesting is our coach in Philadelphia. And then the one that sounds the least interesting is Gannon from Arizona. Those are the ones that I'm kind of, if you wanted to put them on a spectrum of which way, to me, it's very, very clear that there's a lot of respect a lot of respect for that coach in Philadelphia, and not so much the respect for the coach there in Arizona. So, we'll see. I mean, listen, to get these jobs, you have to have sponsors. You have to have sponsors, and trust me, that the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys is fighting his ass off right now to try and help his friend there with Gannon. And those are the things you have to worry about. You would like to believe that it's not about somebody saying, "Hey, hire this guy." And listen, I'm one of these guys that really believes in, if somebody asks for my help, I'm very much I'm not so sure, I don't want to do this. I don't always recommend people myself. But when I do, I have a lot of, I believe in that person is why I would do it. And I'm sure that, I'm sure what's going on in Dallas right now is there are guys standing up for guys that they worked with, and Shoddy has to be very mindful of, like, okay, let's keep an open mind about this. Let's keep an open mind. If you're willing to listen to Dan Quinn about other coaches, then that just tells me you're willing to listen to anybody. And that's the biggest problem sometimes. But I've recommended people in my life, and they've actually worked out really, really, really well. And you fight really, really hard for those people. But the person that I was recommending them to, I felt like had an idea of the type of person that they wanted. And that's my hope for Shoddy. I hope he gets the guy ultimately that makes the most sense for him, makes the most sense for the scouting department when it comes to working with and getting the type of players necessarily, and then a guy that could come in here and be a difference maker as a coach.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Jonathan Gannon, the relationship with Clayton Adams, who he was on staff with in Arizona. Christian Parker stuff is fascinating. Either way, I love the direction the search has gone. It's certainly the most detailed search I think we've seen in a long time here.
Well,
for
a lot of
coaching hire.
Yeah, a lot of that I think has to do with Brian Schottenheimer, and I say it in this way, Zach. I think Jerry Jones stood up there at the podium and pointed the finger at him for the hire of Matt Eberflus. I think he lumped. And, the more you really dive into it, the more that Jerry and Steven and Will had an idea what they maybe wanted to do with their defensive coordinator, much like what we just talked about with Atlanta. Obviously, Arthur Blank and people in the organization think enough of Jeff Ulbrich to want to keep him on board, to fight for that. And so I think that maybe, like you say, Shoddy was up there, and Jerry clearly said, no, Shoddy signed off on this one. Shoddy signed. So, Shoddy's like, okay, if you're going to let me sign off, if you really want me to sign off on a guy, then we're going to do a full interview. I don't know. I haven't gotten if Jerry and Steven were a part of these Zoom interviews. My assumption that maybe not. I think that in-person interviews, the in-person interviews are a little bit different, because what you could do is you could bring him in and you could sit down and put him on the board and now start to talk about, okay, when we attacked you guys this year, how did you guys want to defend us? Shoddy could get him and Will and Jerry and Steven in there. And basically what they could do is have these coaches stand there, loosen their ties, roll up their sleeves, and start mapping out how you attacked. You get an idea of Minnesota, how they attacked you. You get an idea of Philadelphia and how they attacked you. Arizona and how they attacked you. Those were all, if you look at all three of these candidates, they've come from teams where Dallas had a loss this year. So you could always learn something from these interviews. But I would guess that Jerry and Steven are probably involved in these in-person ones, where the Zoom ones were to kind of get to know the guy, and now will bring the determination of who they really, really want to bring in.
All right, so now you're all up to date on the search. Let's slide into a little mock draft Monday, shall we? You are listening to Love of the Star. Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast you can find on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Brian, our buddy Dane Brugler, who I'm sure we can try and get on Love of the Star as well throughout the entire draft process this offseason. And the Cowboys do get a little advantage here because they're going to have the East West Shrine Bowl, which now I believe it's the third or fourth year will be in their own backyard. The game will be played in Frisco. They'll have the practices here in the Metroplex, and their tight ends coach, Lunda Wells, is going to be the offensive coordinator for a squad, and then Aaron Whitecott in the defense.
Aaron Whitecott, there you go. Yeah, absolutely. Both coaches being involved in the game is a good advantage.
That's going to be awesome. Absolutely, it is. And now Dane has given us, after the Dante Moore decision to go back to school to Oregon, how does that impact the first round? So he, on Friday, had one fresh off the press. We did break it down a little bit on the G-Bag Nation on 105.3 The Fan, but let's dive a little bit further in here and just kind of see how this board falls. And in our early studying, which I think we're well into now, like getting into third round players.
I got some fourth round guys on my board. Yeah,
sure there we go. I watched the Alabama wide receiver. He's the guy that I've seen most recently. Finally found a receiver I don't really like. It took a while, but I finally found a guy. I was like, I don't know. I don't know about this Jermaine Bernard guy. From Alabama. He's just kind of, he's okay. He's okay. Don't love him. Fernando Mendoza, of course, the number 1 overall pick, quarterback out of Indiana. As we're recording this on a Monday morning, you'll be able to watch him tonight in the national championship game taking on Miami. So that'll be fun. Arvell Reese, the edge out of Ohio State, going to the New York Jets. And, you know, I've been starting to hear some chatter, like, could Arvell Reese be a guy, maybe like even as Isaiah Simmons that we saw in the draft several years ago from Clemson, where like what position do teams want to play him in? Teams might see him differently. Is he an off-ball linebacker? Is he an edge? To me, he's maybe the most talented player, just freakish athleticism that you could possibly have in the class. But could he be a guy that ends up making it closer to 12 than we initially think right now? I don't. I still think his talent level, he should be a top 3 to 5 pick, no question. But maybe, I never thought CeeDee Lamb would be there at 17 when the Cowboys were on the board. Maybe Arvell Reese is a guy the Cowboys could have more of a chance at 12 than we think.
Yeah, the thing that I believe this, and I know you and I and Aisha, on the stack have kind of gone through some players and talked about some things and why guys are here or there. I know myself, Ach Lombardi, and I, whether, on the Doing All Right, have kind of talked about this. Jeff Kavanaugh, I mean, Trusted Tape, everybody that, we've all done this. And this might be the most scrutinized player in the draft when it's all said and done. This might be the one guy that, we talk about quarterbacks every year, the scrutiny that the quarterbacks go through. But this Arvell Reese might be the one that people try and put the most holes in, because he is so talented, as you talked about, and people are like, where do you play him? Linebacker? You play him at edge? Where do you play him? You draft him and figure it out. Now, you brought up some interesting points. We've seen players in the past. The Simmons is a very good example of that. I remember way back in the day, Jalen Ramsey. There were some questions, with Rod Marinelli and the staff. Do you play him at corner? Do you play him at safety? Where do you play him? And ultimately, teams figured this stuff out. So, but this is a player that I believe is going to, and everything about him is going to be scrutinized, and he is a very, very, very talented player. You could do a lot of things with him, but it'll be interesting to see as we get through the bowl season and then the combine and then leading into the draft, really where people feel this guy is. And I think teams will be real smart about it. I think they know he's one of the best players in the country, but watch the media scouts go after this guy in a lot of different ways. It'll be interesting and fascinating all in the same time period.
Yeah, it will be. And right now, still, Dane's holding strong, having him go number 2 overall to the Jets. That probably would have been a quarterback, still could be a quarterback, but without Dante Moore now, is there just too much of a drop-off between Mendoza to the next guy, which might be Ty Simpson from Alabama? We'll see what happens with Trinidad Chambliss there at Ole Miss. Is there another quarterback that ends up rising?
Yeah, it's funny, but if you look at the history of the New York Jets, actually 2 Alabama quarterbacks they've had I should say this. I think they had Greg McElroy too, so I shouldn't say Greg McElroy.
Yeah.
But I was going back to Joe Namath and then
Yeah.
Richard Todd were two Alabama quarterbacks. The history is actually pretty good there. But I think Greg McElroy was part of that jet quarterback from Alabama. So maybe strike my statement about the Alabama quarterbacks and the New York Jets.
Hey, who knows? They'll just focus on the Joe Namath part of that. And
last time you went to a Super Bowl. There you go.
There you go. Just run with the Jets, fans. First offensive tackle off the board, 3 to Arizona. That would be a Spencer Fano out of Utah. Titans then take Carnell Tate, the wide receiver from Ohio State. You have back-to-back receivers with Jordan Tyson, Allen's own wide receiver from Arizona State, going 5 to the Giants. So that'd be a fun wide receiver duo right there with Malik Neighbors and Jordan Tyson as Coach Harbaugh trying to get that offense and that skill talent looking better. You know, the Harbaugh draft will be interesting here. Like, what type of fingerprints does he put on this coming from, the Ravens, who we all view as arguably the best drafting team in the league? And every year, a talented player, they're always drafted at the back end because they're good, or at worst in the middle of the pack like this year, and somebody good just falls to him. So I'm fascinated. His brother in L.A. immediately took offensive lineman. Joe Alt goes there.
That's where I'm going to go with this. Everybody's got skill guys going to the Giants. I wouldn't be surprised if they take Malinois there. I really wouldn't be surprised.
That'd be a good pick.
I would not be surprised. That offensive line, and they've tried for years. They have tried for years throwing draft picks and signing and money and all that at that offensive line, and it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. Can they do it again? Is there fan base fatigue? That's a good defense. It needs corners. It could probably use some safety help, but man, that is a team that, if they figure out the offensive line, might be able to do some good things. Maybe they'll be a lot further along than we give them credit for, but I wouldn't be surprised. We're all talking skill. And I wouldn't be surprised if they go tried and true and just try and say, you know what, we're going to throw offensive line at this guy one more time and see if we can make things a little bit better.
Be a hell of a pick because Malinois goes to the next selection, 6 overall to the Browns. So if you want him, that might be the high point for him. Unless, he could end up going, being the top tackle drafted if Arizona wanted him there at 3. David Bailey, the edge out of Texas Tech, goes to Washington at 7. That's a pick you're like, darn it, if you're a Cowboy fan. Jeremiah Love, how about this running back in the top 10,
Let me ask you this real quick, Zach. Let me ask you this real quick. And you just mentioned Bailey going with that pick there. As you're looking at this, just what are you thinking about at 12? Just put your Dallas Cowboy hat on and be Brian Schottenheimer and Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, Will McClay. What are you thinking about at 12? Sure, you just want to see where the board falls to you. Mm-hmm. But what are you really hoping you end up with at 12?
So I'm hoping Downs
going into that Thursday night. What are you hoping?
Right. So I'm hoping Caleb Downs can slide the safety.
So you're looking at safety first, okay?
Just because, and he's just that player that I think would be the best of the bunch. After that, I'm monitoring the edges and the corners. That's for 12. That's kind of where I'm eyeing on this thing. I think, could you get David Bailey to get there to 12? Can I get Reuben Bain to get there to 12? If they don't, then, hey, what's our board looking like? How do we have this thing stacked with Mansour Delane, the corner from LSU, and then Jermod McCoy, the corner from Tennessee, because those would be the top guys that I'd be looking at. So those would be the names I'd kind of be monitoring there at 12, and then the fallback for me could possibly be Sonny Styles, the linebacker from Ohio State, who I do have a first-round grade on. We'll see how others feel about him. And even if you don't, I don't think you do, but I'm sure he's probably going to be hovering around anywhere from 15 to 18 best player.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So wouldn't be like a crazy reach to take him there at 12. I'm sure his name would be in consideration, but that's kind of where I'm looking is, can I get Downs, who would be the top player on my board, to slide there to 12, which the safeties do. Like the two teams that I think have a history of taking the safeties, Washington and Kansas City.
Right
and in
ahead.
Dane's mock, Kansas City does take him at 9.
Yeah.
So 7 and 9, he could be poached from you if he slides there at 12. I just think Caleb Downs the kind of player that can fix a lot of things for you when you talk about the coverage building on the back end, also coming up and supporting the run. He's just such a jack of all trades, Swiss Army knife type player, can help you in the slot if you need him to. So that would be probably the dream scenario. But otherwise, I'm kind of monitoring the edges. And then could I have the chance to take the best corner on my board there at 12? Would you feel differently, or are you eyeing anybody else?
No, I'm absolutely. I think there's going in. You have to determine of your defensive players which you feel is better. You need right now is, do you feel like you need the end at 12 or do you need the corner at 12? The safety to me would be, it would be outstanding if he were there. My gut feeling says he probably won't be there, but if he's there, I have to be ready to pick him.
Mm-hmm.
I have to determine, and I don't have Styles but like you said, Styles is hovering outside my first round stack. I would say that I would probably look at, and this is where I have McCoy above Delane, and I think that we're going to start seeing that McCoy is working out. McCoy's working with trainers. I've seen some clips already of him working with defensive back coaches and stuff like that. So I think things for the combine, it's not like he's going to show up in a brace and then you have to determine whether he's ready to go or not. It's been a year since the injury. And so I think that you'll start to see McCoy and he'll answer some questions for you along that way. But what you have to determine, though, if Bailey goes off the board, does that, okay, now if you're say your best edge is off the board, if your best edge is off, well, depending on what you did with Reese, but if your best edge, your next best edge is off the board being Bailey, are you comfortable taking Bain? Are you comfortable taking McCoy? Are you comfortable taking Delane? I think that's where you have to. I think that's where the Cowboys are going to probably be looking at this right now, is that situation.
So McCoy, right in front of you, Miami says, you know what? We want the corner. Jermon McCoy out of Tennessee goes at 11, and I'm with you. I know Cowboy fans are like, gosh, don't take another hurt guy. I think that hopefully McCoy proves throughout the process, a year plus removed from this thing. I've maintained, I think he had every intention of playing this year at the back half of the season. If the Vols were in contention to make the playoff, I think you would have seen him play. They weren't, so he turns his focus towards the draft. I don't think this is going to be like a Savone Revel, Diggs, Bland, where like this guy's not even playing in training camp. I think he's going to be coming into rookie mini camps ready to rock. And hopefully that would make Cowboy fans feel a little easier about that selection if he were the pick there. So the Cowboys on the clock at 12. Sonny Styles, linebacker from Ohio State, is there, and that is who ultimately Dane has them picking. But Mansour Delane, the corner from LSU, is there. Keldrick Falk, the edge from Auburn, is there. You've also got Peter Woods, the defensive tackle from Clemson. Lomu, the offensive tackle from Utah. All of those players available sitting there for you. Unfortunately, you've got Bailey off the board. You had Ruben Bain go off the board to Cincinnati at pick 10. So your top edges are all gone, including Reese. And then maybe your best corner is gone and Downs is gone. So in this scenario, it comes down to me, Delane, the corner from LSU, or would it be Styles, the linebacker from Ohio State? Those would probably be the top two defensive players on the board, in my opinion, and probably the best players, period. I would actually lean Delane here, Brian, the corner from LSU at pick 12.
Me too. I agree. And you know what? And then kind of hope and see what the situation happens at 20. I'm comfortable with, I know you're a big fan of Rodriguez from Texas Tech. I'm a fan of Hill from Texas. I know there's people that really like CJ Allen from Georgia. Would he be there? I think then it turns into like, okay, we're going to grab the best corner that we got and then turn around and depending on there's could be some defensive ends there as well. Is Mansour there? Is that something that you would be, 25 years old? Did the feet check out? A lot of things being talked about with him. But I think that you're at 20, you're in a prime spot to grab a guy, and there might be enough depth there to where you can move back a couple of spots and still grab the guy you want and pick up a day 2 pick, along the way, whether it be a 3rd round pick or something. Maybe you can move back a couple spots and make that determination. But I do feel like there's going to be some quality options. If you take Delane at 12, I think that would be a tremendous pick. And now you're going to have options at 20, which I think are going to be okay for you. I really do.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think you're going to have be in a good spot, and Delane is just an absolute stud, and his ability, the flexibility, man, zone, super sticky player. You can see the IQ when you watch him play, willing tackler. The size we'll see there. I think he's plenty big enough, but Delane would be a great pick. So then you look at 20. The Cowboys on the clock again. Since they went linebacker, Dane has them taking Avion Terrell, the corner from Clemson, which we'll have to see, hey, how do the Cowboys feel about his size there? The other players on the board, Brandon Cisse would be there, the corner from South Carolina, that would be an interesting conversation. Who would they like more between those two corners?
I would have Cisse higher but it's the old tags touching, both 1st round players, both inside the top 15 for me. So I think I would take the thing that you have to ask yourself is, this could be very similar. Like the scouts might like the more steady Terrell, and depending on who your defensive coordinator is the lack of bulk going to be a problem for this coach, at 180 pounds? Terrell's scouts will love the just the steadiness of Terrell.
Mm-hmm.
But at 20 years old, Cisse from South Carolina, man, that guy's he's a little bit bigger guy. He's got some ability. He's a younger guy. He's a little bit more of a gambler. And I say that in a good way. I mean, he is, the way that he plays, I personally have him over Terrell, but it could be very much like the Cowboy scouts when they were trying to determine with J.C. Horn and then our guy at Denver, Surtain, I kind of, and they're the coaches were looking at Horn and the scouts were thinking Surtain because he was a little bit safer, steadier player. And you might have the same situation with Terrell and Cisse. They might like somebody. They might like somebody else. You never know. They might have somebody else. Abney from
Arizona State.
Arizona State might be a guy that they might really, really like as well.
Yeah, no, very true. I mean, to me, I think it would probably be, since you already took Delane, the linebackers would be
Hood could be there too. I'm sorry, I didn't mention Hood from Tennessee, who is a much bigger guy than all the guys that we're kind of talking about.
Runs really well, super good athlete. But yeah, I think the linebackers would all be in conversation there, whether it's C.J. Allen out of Georgia, Anthony Hill Jr. out of Texas, and then you mentioned Akeem Mesidor, the edge from Miami, maybe Cassius Howe, the A&M edge. I think in this scenario, I would take Akeem Mesidor from Miami, and I'd be sitting there with Delane and Mesidor, and I feel good about
it. Helped your defense.
If you have the opportunity to move back a little bit, can I get an extra day 3 pick, and then I can go ahead and land Jacob Rodriguez in the 2nd or 3rd round, depending on if he's there? That'd be awesome. And now I've checked off all my boxes. But again, you got to have a dance partner if you want to be able to pull that off. So there's a little mock draft Monday for you. We'll be talking so much more draft throughout the entire process. Brian is going to be on the call for the East West Shrine game. That's going to be awesome. I'm going to need to count on you because I won't get to do the practices this year. You need to feed me all the inside info. Give me the scout side. I'm going to need all the inside info on these players because, gosh, they are doing wonders. I mean, shout out to Eric Gelko getting a really good lineup together there at the East West Shrine Bowl. So many of those players were drafted last year that took place in that game, and you can go and watch it if you're locally here in the Metroplex. Get your tickets. Go out to the Star there, and you can watch that game, scout them out. All right, let's wrap this up with the Dean Julia mailbag. You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much to the On Time Experts. Love of the Star proudly presented by the On Time Experts, the official AC heating and plumbing partner for the Dallas Cowboys. as we get into the mailbag, some of these, I saw, and we're never sure how many we can get into. Tried to kind of sprinkle in this info for you throughout the show, but I do like to take a trip down memory lane. And Ryan wanted to know, Brian, as we had the 33rd anniversary of the 92 NFC title game, can you please retell the account of being at that game, 49ers fans, Cowboys fans, as you were, you didn't really want to make that public. Alvin Harper makes that catch. What was going on for Brian Broaddus on that day, that game?
Yeah, it was happened to be, I was there actually at the East-West game. I was in Palo Alto, California for the game. And so we're there for the playoffs. And John Dorsey, who I scouted with in Green Bay and who famously drafted Pat Mahomes, who traded up at Kansas City to draft Mahomes. So John's an outstanding scout. So he's got friends that have a suite at the old Candlestick Park. And so I get invited to the game, and I'm sitting there in my Green Bay Packer gear. I've got the sweat top and the coaching shirt. I look like a Packer coach sitting up there. So people are in the box. Everybody's, kind of talking. They're going on and on and on. And they're all kind of basically bad-mouthing people from Dallas. They're talking about, Dallas people are this, Dallas people are this, Dallas, they're going on and on and on. And I'm just kind of nodding my head, oh, yeah, okay, great, yeah. Then these people realize that I'm actually from Dallas. None of them know. And so I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to cause a scene. And it's the whole game. It is the whole game that basically MF and the Cowboys and MF and Dallas and all this, and they're going on and on and on. And I'm just sitting there. And like Harper catches that ball, and I stand up in the box and I'm like, run, run, run. I'm yelling. I'm yelling at the top of my lungs. Excuse me. And so, everybody's just like freezes.
What the hell?
What the hell? Excuse me. And so everybody freezes, and then, he gets tackled and all. And they turn around and look at me. They're all looking at me, and just, what the hell? And I said, listen here, you MFers. And I said that. I go, you sat here and talked about how this about Dallas and how that about Dallas. And I'm from Dallas. And I go, you guys can all go F yourselves. And John looked at me. These are John's friends. John looked at me and goes, Brian, I guess it's time to go. And I looked at him. I said, yeah, I guess so. So we got up, we
Let's
left.
Go.
That was it. John, we got the car. He goes, you just had to do it. I go, John, you heard those people talking. I was good the whole game. I was good until that very end of that game.
Yeah.
And he goes, I understand. So, yeah, that's the story. I thought I was doing a good job holding it together until I continually heard about my hometown and the team I grew up watching and all that, and then I just lost it at the end.
I love
it.
Yeah.
I did call them all MFers too. Never been invited back to any of
Yeah. Well, at least you were there for one of the greatest moments in Cowboys history.
I was there.
And that play was so epic, dude.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if you're going to call those guys MFers, that's the play.
Yeah.
That's the moment to do it. You got your money's worth on that one.
I did. I got my money's worth for sure.
All right, Mendel wants to know, do you think any team would go ahead and give up a 1 and then maybe even a 2 and a 3 for a tag George Pickens? I think in this scenario, it'd probably be a 1 and a 3. Baltimore, Cleveland, Denver, like any of these wide receiver teams. Do you think somebody would do that?
Well, the thing is, you give up the 1 or the 3 or the 2, whatever you're giving up, and then you got to pay George Pickens. Or do you just stand in there and draft? And do you, if you're a team that, the teams that you mentioned, the Baltimores, the Clevelands, the people like that, I think a lot of people are willing to just stand there and pick wide receivers. These wide receivers, we looked at, I personally feel like a guy like Tyson from Arizona State, very similar to the kinds of traits that you see in a George Pickens. So do you just say, you know what, we could take a guy like that and not have to pay him and have some control and, this, that, and the other. George Pickens would be a very, very valuable piece. I think George Pickens, to be honest with you, would have been a more valuable piece at the trade deadline than he would now. And so That's kind of, you got a team that was interested in saying, we'll give you a one, we'll give you a one right now and we'll move on and do that. So, I kind of feel like that, it's a possibility. I think I think you have a couple of tradable pieces. If you really want to trade, you could trade your kicker. And if you get that one signed, you got him on a restrict, you get that, you got him tendered, you're in a situation where I think that you could just, hopefully he signs and then don't match the tender. You know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. So there's possibilities. I say trade the kicker. I'm thinking now maybe it's a situation you let him get signed,
sure,
and don't match. Whereas Pickens, you trade. I'm just in my mind. I used to know the rules to all this thing, and they've changed the rules on me, what you can and cannot do. But you do have the option. You can match the kicker if you want, or you can, like I said, you can let him go and then get the second round pick from that team. Or, like I say, you can sign, tag George Pickens and then trade. That is what you can do. So those are your possibilities right there.
And I'm with you. And, hopefully, I'd like to keep GP here. But either way, the Cowboys are in a great position because you tag him. And then if a team does say, hey, we want him, maybe they give you an offer you love. Maybe the negotiations don't go the way that you want them to. But a fascinating development that's going on as we're recording this live on a Monday morning. So when you get this and you're listening and consuming all of this, this won't be breaking news for you. But the Bills have just fired head coach Sean McDermott after 9 seasons. They have made the move there. Now, Sean McDermott, I'm sure, is going to instantly be in consideration for some of these other head coaching openings that have not been filled. Obviously, you do have Kevin Stefanski in Atlanta, and you've got Harbaugh in New York. Now, if he doesn't get one of these, could McDermott do what Mike Tomlin's doing and take a year off 100%? But Sean McDermott is a fascinating defensive mind. I wonder if at all he would become an option for the defensive coordinator role if he doesn't land one of these head coaching jobs. I'd be surprised if he didn't. He's had tremendous success in Buffalo, just unfortunately hasn't been able to get over that hurdle. But my gosh, that's another big-time coach whose name has a tremendous defensive background.
Yeah, and this is something that we kind of talked about last week that could very well happen, with the situation at Buffalo. If they did, in fact, with no Mahomes and no Jackson, and they needed to find a way to get over the hump and win games. And so I will say this though, Sean McDermott is a Andy Reid disciple. Came from the Andy Reid system in Philadelphia. If you remember what Andy Reid did when he got let go in Philadelphia, he immediately jumped into Kansas City. Immediately jumped in. I could see Sean McDermott doing the same thing if given the opportunity. I could absolutely see him in. Now, where's that situation? He immediately becomes a very, very popular candidate. Now, I think that maybe this Kansas. We'll see what happens at Buffalo with the interviews and stuff like that. Does this mean that Joe Brady's going to get this job in Buffalo now? That's where maybe they were worried about. Maybe someday losing a Joe Brady and stuff like that in Buffalo. So we'll see how that all plays out. But my gut feeling with the openings that are still there, that maybe McDermott will want to get back on that horse as quickly as possible, and go from there.
Absolutely crazy. Some of the big time openings that have happened here this offseason in the NFL. All right, let's wrap up the mailbag with this one's an interesting question from Dibbs. He wants to know, let's say the Cowboys double dip at corner in the draft. Mm-hmm. What do you think would be what's your favorite pairing if they were to double dip and take two corners there at maybe 12 and 20?
Well, I personally like McCoy. Now, if it's the Cowboys, if you're picking, they might think of Delane ahead of McCoy because of the injury stuff. But that hasn't stopped him before. Let's just assume that they don't want to draft another corner that had an injury history. Let's just assume. Give me Delane, and then also give me Cisse. I think Cisse might stretch in this thing. I think he might stretch into this thing. I would think that would be a really, really, really good opportunity. They might sit there and think about They might want Hood. If you ask me, but I'm gonna pick who I think that they might like. So I'm gonna go with Delane, and I'm gonna go with Cisse would be the ones I think that they would probably want. I think Terrell's going to be too short for them. I think he's going to be too short for Will. Now, depending on who the defensive coordinator is, that could say a lot. But double dipping at corner would not be a bad thing if you could. We saw what the Philadelphia Eagles were able to do with Cooper DeJean and then with Mitchell, and how it completely turned around their secondary.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And the issue is, man, I'd love it if you were able to land a safety, double dip at corner and safety. There's just not one that I think is worthy of taking there at 20, which is unfortunate. But I agree. I think ultimately, because I think Cisse can kick inside and give you some slot ability. I think that would be a tremendous pairing. All right. Thank you so much for everything in this one. Love of the Stars and Audacy podcast. You can find on the Audacy app, wherever you get your podcasts. We love you. We thank you for being a part of Love of the Star and our Cowboys community here. Thank you so much to, of course, Eric Chiafalo, Peyton Russell. We'll have another episode for you. Cowboys defensive coordinator search rolls on. You got another hot commodity out there on the market in Sean McDermott of the Bills. For Brian Broaddus, I'm Zach Wolchuk. Hugs and hand pounds, everybody. We'll see you next time.